Today's daf is daf nun tes. We still have a little bit of a piece, 2.5 lines on daf nun chesamid beis. Nis armalu o nis garshu mina nesuin psulos mina erisin ksheros. So we're talking now about a case in which an almana was nisarsa to a kohen, or I should be more precise about it. In the case of nisarmalu, we're talking specifically about a kohen gadol. In the case of niskarshu, we could talk about a kohen hedjot. And the Mishnah says that according to Rabbi Meir, the kohen gadol should not be married to a bogeres, and she is what you call kolu b'suleha, and the Torah commands the kohen gadol hu isha b'psuleh yikach, and he's not allowed to marry a bogeres shekolu b'suleha. He's got to marry a ketana or a nara. Boy minei Rabbi Chia bar Yosef mishmuel. Here's the suffix: kohen gadol shekidesh es haketana, which is kibitzvah. So that's what he's meant to do. Ubagu. While she's an arusa, she matured past the age of 12 and a half. And now we start today's daf nun tes. Mao, is he allowed to take her into the chuppah and create a nesuin? Basar nesuin azlinon. The Torah says isha b'psuleh yikach. It's referring to nesuin. That means at the time of the nesuin, she must be a b'sula in order to allow the kohen gadol to bring her into the chuppah. This woman is now kolu b'suleh. She's a bogeres. He's not allowed to take her into the chuppah. Or perhaps basar erison azlin. As long as she was a basula at the time of yikach, because it says u isha b'psula yikach. Yikach is referring to erison. Then he already fulfilled his obligation in terms of the marriage to a basula, and therefore now he's allowed to be noseo, so he can take her into nesuin. Amalei Shmuel responds to Rabbi Chia bar Yosef to nisua. We can derive the conclusion from our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Nis'armulo nisgarshu bina nisuin psulos. In other words, if they were already at the point of nisuas lekohen, then psulos, they cannot eat truma, and they don't go back to Beis Avim after the marriage with the kohen terminates with either his death, that's nisarmalu, or with a divorce in nisgarshu. And this is because it was minan nisuin. That means they already had bia, and that bia of an almana with a kohen gadol passes her for kahuna, and she becomes a chalala through the bia with a kohen. In the case of nisgarshu, a kohen hedjot. However, in this armalu or nisgarshu mina erisin, they never consummated the marriage with a bia ksheros. She can go back to her father's house and eat truma. So from the fact that the Mishnah says this armalu and nisgarshu, and specifically mina erisin ksheros, we see clearly that the psulei kuna, in psulei kuna, we everything is determined. Holchim achar shas hanesuin. The key moment is the moment of nesuin. They will generate an isa, not erisin, but nesuin. So therefore, if a kohen gadol was makadish a ketana, and she became a bogeres after the erisin, he would not be able to marry her with nesuin, also lolakonso, even though the kedusha was beheter when she was a ketana, but nevertheless we are holchim achar shas nesuin. The critical moment is the moment of nesuin. And since b'shas nesuin she was a bogeres, he's not allowed to be kohen. So that was the response of Shmuel. And the Gemara rejects Shmuel. Amalei Rabbi Chia retorts back to Shmuel, L'shavua chalola lo kami boile. I never had a suffix. Does she become a chalola through Erison? No. For sure, she doesn't become a chalola through Erison alone, because bia he the meshavi chalola. It's only bia that could generate chalolas. So certainly in this armalon mina Erison, she's certainly not psula b'toras chalola from eating truma. Hikami boile. V'hu isha b'psula yikach mai kicha de kedushin be'inan or kicha de nesuin be'inan. When the Torah requires that a kohen gadol marry a basula, was that at the time of kedushin or at the time of nesuin? And the nafkamina is our question about a bogeres when she became a bogeres between erisin and nesuin. So again, Rabbi Chia is telling Shmuel that he doesn't have any proof from our Mishnah, because the issue of whether Shanachi becomes a chalola through Erisin or Nesuin, that was never an issue at all, because it's Bia de Mashve chalola. Only on Al Yidei Bia does she become a chalola. So therefore, if it's Almala Mina Erisin, for sure she can continue to eat Truma, and she doesn't become a chalola, and she can marry a Kohen. She's not a chalol. Amalei Shmuel says, Hanami T'nisua. This too can be derived from our Mishnah, because Kohen Hedjot Eres Es Halmana, which he's allowed to do, Nisman Alios Kohen Gadol. After the Erisin, he was appointed as Kohen Gadol. Yichtos, he's allowed to be Konisa, simply because at the time of Erisin, it was all Behetem. You see that everything depends on Chas Erisin. So that even though at the time of Nesuin, she is an Almana and he's the Kohen Gadol, nevertheless, there's nothing prohibited about it. So too in the case where the Kedushin took place when she was a Ketana. Now, at the time of the Nesuin, she's already a Bogeres. It should be okay. And the Gemara rejects that. Shiny Hasam Ditsiv. With regard to an Almana for a Kohen Gadol, it says, Ki im bisula b'amav yikach isha. And the word isha is superfluous, as we discussed in the past. And we're going to darshan that it all depends on Shas Erisin. Therefore, if the Erisin took place and she was an Almana, but he was a Kohen Hedjah, and then subsequently appointed as Kohen Gadol, then he's allowed to marry her. Again, shiny hasam dichsiv yikach isha, and the extra word isha teaches me that holchim achar shas erisin. Therefore, if the almana was nisarsel l'kohen, and then subsequently he was appointed as the Kohen Gadol, he's allowed to be konesa. Machenken ketana shebagra, he was the Kohen Gadol from day one. We can't derive that from this pasuk. So the Gemara asks, well, if from the extra word isha, you could be marbe this principle that holchem achar shas erisin hachanam iksiv isha, here too, with regard to a ketana shebagra, why don't we derive from the word isha that holchem achar shas erisin? And since the Kohen Gadol was ma'ares a basula kidin, kidasu kidin, therefore, when she becomes a bogeres, he's allowed to be konisa, just like when he was a Kohen Hedjot at the time of the Erisin, and he was ma'ares and almona. Later on, he became the Kohen Gadol, he was appointed, then he's allowed to be konisa. More answers, achas v'lo shtayim. the pasuk Isha is marba only one woman. Now you're being marba two women. Umayrois. So how do you know which of these two ladies to be marba? Ha ishtani gufa, the ha lo ishtani gufa. In the case of Bagra, her guf changed because kolu b'sulel. So with the change of guf between Eris and Nesua, we should say she became Asura l'kohen gadol, because she's not the same as she was in the time of Eris. But her, in the case of Almana, lo ishtani gufa, nothing changed from the time that he was Mekadisha. And therefore it's logical that if the Torah was marbe with the word Isha, to be matter one of two women, it would be marbe, the woman that lo nishtani gufa, that she's the same gufa she was the Shas Erison today. And the Torah was matir, if lo nishtani gufa from Shas Kedushin, to be konisar. Not so in the case of Ketana, Shenis Bagra, and Kolu B'Sula. And now we get up to the Mishnah here on Daf Nun Tes. In Nesui Kohen Gadol, the Torah says, "V'yishav b'Sula yikach almano grusha v'chalala zonas elu lo yikach ki im b'Sula me'amav yikach isha." And now our Mishnah is going to delineate those women that are asuras to a Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol lo yisa almana, bein almana min ha'erisin, bein almana min ha'nesuin. Whether she was married to her first husband with erisin or nesuin, she is an almana, and she's asura to a Kohen Gadol. V'lo yisa es habogeres. He should not marry a bogeres who's 12 years and 6 months old. Rabbi Eliezer Rab Shim machshirin b'bogeres. They allow a Kohen Gadol to marry a bogeres. V'lo yisa es mukas eitz. A Kohen Gadol should not marry a woman who had some sort of an event. She had a, sort of like a bang, an injury, and as a result, her fusulin were removed. That's called mukas eitz. There was no bias adam, and she has no basulin. The Torah commands the Kohen Gadol to marry bis isha b'bsulayi. The Gemara says, Tana Rabban, almana grusha v'chalala zona es elu lo yikach. And the Brisa darshans that Kohen Gadol cannot marry an almana, bein almana mina erisin, ubein almana mina nesuin. So the Gemara asks pshita. Certainly, a Kohen Gadol cannot marry an almana mina erisin or mina nesuin. The Torah says almana, which implies any sort of an almana. Mal detema, I would have said leilif almana mi tamar. Mal alon in tamar. It says Yomi Yudol tamar kalasot shvi almana. Base avich ad yigdal shela b'ni, and this almana is an almana min ha nesuin. So we see that the word almana is referring to almana min ha nesuin, and the chait of Viona was machmas bia is afkan here too. In the case of Kohen Gadol, almana lo yikach bein min ha nesuin. I'm sorry, min ha nesuin. I would have thought that just like the almana in the pasuk in Tamar, it's got to be an almana min nesuin here too. Kamash from the Bryce says that even almana min erisin is asur l'kohen gadol. How do you know, in fact, that we should not derive this kseir shavah from Tamar and limit an almana to a kohen gadol? The Yisra almana is only almana min nesuin, and the Gemara answers dumya de grusha. In the same pasuk, it says almana who is prohibited to a Kohen Gadol, and a grusha to a Kohen Hedjot. Ma grusha bein min ha'erisin bein min ha'nesuin, af almana bein min ha'erisin bein min ha'nesuin. So the assumption here is that a grusha is min ha'erisin. Now, in the case of grusha, there's no source to arrive that the Yisra only applies min ha'nesuin and not min ha'erisin. In the case of In the case of Almana, there we had a Gzeir Shava to Tamar, Rakmin and Asur. So in any event, we have this principle that a grusha is asur l'kohen hedger gam min ha'erisin. And we're going to compare that to Almana. The Mishnah says, Lo Yisa, Kohen Gadol Sabu Geres, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimach Shir, in Ton Rabbana, we learned in a Brisa, the Pasuk says in Emar Bahu, Isha Bibsuleh Yikach. Let's dash the word Bibsuleh, Prat Lebogeres, Shekol Bibsuleh. A Bogeres, 12 and a half, is excluded from Bibsuleh. Divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Lazar of Shimach Shir Bogeres Afshekol Bibsuleh. B'maykom Ifligu. Rabbi Meir Savar Bisula Afilu Miktas Bisulin Mashma. According to Rabbi Meir, if she only has Miktas Bisulin, like the case of Bogeres, she's Sheira L'Kohen Gadol. But now the Torah adds an extra yud, and it says Bisuleha, telling us that it's not sufficient that she has Miktas Bisulin. She needs all the Bisulin. Adeika Kol Bisulin, which a Bogeres doesn't have. Therefore, she's disqualified to the Kohen Gadol. It says Bibsuleha with a base, an extra base, Bib Bisuleha, and that's already a mute to exclude Nashim Asuros and teach us that only a Nivala B'makom Bisuleha, which means B'kedarka, then she becomes Asur L'Kohen Gadol. But Nivala Shalo Kedarka, lo, meaning Eina Neseres L'Kohen Gadol. And that's the mute that we derive from the extra bays to exclude a case of Nivala Shalo Kedar. She's not Asura to the Kohen Gadol. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon, they disagree with Savri. They hold Bisula means Bisula Shlema Mashma, as opposed to a Bogeres who only has Miktas Bisula, and she's Asura. And since it says Bisuleha with an extra Yud, which is a Ribui, Afilu Miktas Bisulin is also Kshera. So Bogeres that has Miktas Bisulin would be Kshera. And then the extra bays, Bibsuleh, Achiyu Kol Bisuleh Kayom. She didn't lose her Bisulin at all. But Nivala, Bain, Bekedarka, Bain Chalokedarka, Rein Nifseles L'Kohen Gadol. And again, a case of Bogeres, she's Muteres. But the Torah adds the base of Bibsulet to prohibit Ba'ula Chalokedarka. Achasha Omer Torah she'ein sochshiu kayomin kol besulah v'day b'mikzas besuleh Omer Torah she'mikzas besuleh eila tzrichim lios af b'makom shelo kedar. Omer Rav Yehuda Marav nivala shelo kedarka psula lekahuna. Kahuna here refers to a Kohen Gadol. He has to marry a besula, and if she had be'ila shelo kedarka, then she's no longer besula. Masiv Rava has to find kasha from a brisa. It says in the parsha in Dvarim Chav Beis of a naira that was raped, v'nasan ha'ish hashokeh v'imo lavi anara chamishim kosef, and then the pasuk says v'lo sia leisha tachas asher ino lo yuchal shalcha kol yom ama'anes naira besula. Not only does he pay 50 kesef lavia nara, he also is obligated to marry anusasa. And the Brisa continues and darshins that this chiyuv on the ma'anes to marry anusaso is rak be'isha uyalo, a woman that's not asuralo, but pratli almana l'kohen gadol ugrusha v'chalutza l'kohen ejo. So the Gemara asks, "Domi, how could there be a bias ones, which means that the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry her because she's an anusa, and yet she's an almana? It says here, prat l'almana l'kohen Gadol." If we're going to say that what kind of an onus was it? It was kidarka. My area mishum almana. Why is she asura under the category of almana l'kohen gadol? Typically, she should be asura mishum dahavi le'ba'ula, because after she was raped, then she's a ba'ula. She's asura l'kohen gadol, even if it was be'ulas atmo, as we'll see later on. Elolav, but rather the Bryce is certainly talking about a case of unsa shalokidar. And therefore, mishum almana in, the Isser here is only because she's an almana, but mishum be'ula lo, she is not prohibited him under the Isser be'ula because her be'ilu is shelo kedarka, and it's not called be'ilu. So now we don't understand the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, who said that even though she was nivala shelo kedarka, she's considered a be'ula, and she's psula l'kahuna. Now we turn to Nun Tes Amud Beis. Mani Rabbi Meir he. So this brisa, in a case of anusa shelo kedarka, is not a kasha on Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, because this brisa reflects the shita Rabbi Meir, who formulates he rules. Let's put it that way. He rules that there's an Isser of Kohen Gadol to marry his own anusa. She's considered like an almana. That's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir holds that the word bisuleha means kol bisuleha kayom, and a bogeres doesn't have kol bisuleha. She's kol bisuleha. She's asura to Kohen Gadol, and the base of bibsuleha, which was superfluous, is coming to exclude nivala shelo kedarka. She's muteres, but a bogeres is asura. Therefore, the Brisa says that in the case of nensa shelo kedarka, she's not asura mishum almana, v'lo mishum be'ula, because according to Rabbi Meir, be'ula shelo kedarka is muteres. But Rav di Omar, in a case of nivala shelo kedarka, she's considered be'ula, she's psula l'kohen gadol. He holds ki Rabbi Elazar, who says that the yitur at the beginning of the word bifsulea teaches us that a bogeres is allowed to marry a Kohen Gadol. And the base, which is superfluous, in the word bifsulea, he uses to derive that a ba'ula shelo kedarka is psula l'kohen Gadol.